Hello there, everyone. Pedophilia is one of those subjects that everybody dreads talking about. Our ability to understand it is, of course, obscured by our level of disgust for it. So for the sake of this particular episode, I ask you to keep a completely open mind. Remain open to understanding this particular condition. I also want to stress that we have to suspend the idea of what right versus wrong is. We've already made our mind up that something is wrong, and as a result, we're not going to be able to fully understand it. It's actually a feeling within a person, and no matter whether you make something right or wrong, somebody is going to feel the way they feel. Throughout the course of this video, I will refer to people who feel sexually attracted to children as pedophiles. But this label is for understanding's sake. I'm not using this label to shame, discredit, or objectify anyone who happens to have those feelings. We are born whole, but that wholeness is short-lived because we are relationally dependent. Being born relationally dependent into families that socialize us into a society that is not fully developed yet causes us to learn that some aspects of ourselves are acceptable and others are not. What is acceptable versus unacceptable depends on the perspective of the family that you're born into. The aspects of us that are seen as unacceptable, both positive and negative, are rejected by our family, and the aspects that are seen as acceptable are not. So being relationally dependent in the name of survival, we do anything we can to disown and deny and suppress those aspects in ourselves that are disapproved of, whilst exaggerating those that are approved of. We dissociate from what we disapprove of. This creates a split within us. This self-preservation instinct is in fact our first act of self-rejection. We have lost parts of ourselves, and so we begin to feel anguish and an emptiness inside. From this point on, we are attracted to people in our lives who mirror the aspect of us that we have suppressed, denied, or rejected. We are a perfect match to them, even though they seem to be the opposite of it, because that denied self is still a part of us. It's just suppressed from our awareness. Therefore, it is still subject to the law of attraction. We fall in love with our lost self, and as a result of connecting with them, we get to have our lost self back. For this reason, with them, we feel more whole. We also become sexually attracted to our subconscious definition of intimacy. This is the real reason why it's so common for people who are sexually abused as children to go on to be perpetrators of sexual abuse. This unconscious definition was set up in our childhood by our interactions with our primary attachment figures in childhood. As sad as it may seem, if the intimacy in our family is abusive, we often develop sexual fetishes that involve some level of abuse. It is true that for many of us, the craving for orgasm is the craving for relief. Relief in the form of release. This feeling of relief becomes its own addiction. This is a big part of what we are addicted to if we were addicted to pornography. But ultimately, on a higher level, the progression towards orgasm and the craving for orgasm is the progression towards and craving for oneness. Just like love is the movement towards oneness, to love someone is to include them as you. To orgasm with someone as a byproduct of love is to become conscious of the experience of being one. It is to move beyond the physical world, which separates us from one another and separates us from our eternal self. We do it to feel more whole. What does all of this mean for a pedophile? It means that they were hurt so badly when they were children, that they had to suppress the aspect of themselves that was a child completely. They had to suppress their own innocence. Their childness and innocence had to be suppressed, denied, and rejected for the sake of emotional, mental, or physical survival. There is therefore an aspect of them that had to grow up way too fast and thus could not develop naturally, and thus there is a part of themselves that they dissociated from that is in fact frozen in a state of childhood. Now, most people think that pedophilia is something which cannot be quote-unquote cured. They think that it's possible to manage your impulses and thus not act out on those feelings, but the feelings will always be there. I don't actually agree with this particular theory, because the second that a pedophile reconnects with their own innocence. They no longer have a need to connect with something external that represents innocence. This view, of course, upsets people who think that sexual orientation is something that you're born with and you can do nothing about, but I can assure you that we don't understand sexual attraction almost at all. We are making it far too simple, and we are especially making it too simple when we say things like sexual orientation is just something that you're born with and you can do nothing about. There are also people who will associate pedophilia with developmental issues within the brain. But this is, again, because our modern medical science doesn't understand the concept of consciousness existing beyond the brain. They are not really considering that it might just be possible that consciousness itself and what consciousness experiences as it progresses through life causes changes within the brain. What is innocence? Innocence is a lightness of being. It is a worry-free state. It is a state where one has not compromised themselves or their morals in any way. There is a purity to the state, because in a state of innocence there is nothing obscuring our light. Most people associate innocence with ignorance or with weakness, when innocence is neither of these things. When we gain knowledge, we do not have to lose innocence. This only occurs if the knowledge we gain causes us to move into a space of pain or fear. And contrary to popular opinion, there is an immense bravery in innocence. Innocence is a state of openness. Its light is not guarded. It is benevolent and untouchable. We may be able to obscure the light of our innocence to the degree that we have no awareness of it, but the light itself cannot be burnt out. We lose touch or awareness of our innocence when we become hurt and afraid. Under hatred there is always hurt, and under hurt there is always innocence. It is sad to me that people associate naivety with innocence, when naivety in fact has absolutely nothing to do with innocence. It also denotes the fact that we have this public perception that ignorance is in fact bliss, and also that we still suffer from a biblical holdover, where knowledge is in fact a sin. In fact, the more wise you become and the more you understand about this universe, the closer you get to a state of innocence. Pedophiles are not monsters. In fact, many pedophiles never act out on their emotions, on that particular urge, and abuse children. They don't molest them. In fact, most of them live out their life in quiet desperation, unable to ever tell anyone. In many places, there are mandatory reporting laws that say that if someone informs a therapist that they are afraid they might be a pedophile, or that they have sexual inclinations towards children, regardless of whether they have or have not acted on those feelings, they must be reported to authorities. We hoped, of course, that this would cut down on child molestation. However, all this has done is cause pedophiles to stop seeking therapy entirely. Many people are too afraid of the legal consequences and the societal disgust to admit to their feelings and get help for them. So there are, in fact, more pedophiles circulating in today's society with no psychological or emotional support at all. Because when a pedophile was young, they were hurt badly enough on a physical, mental, or emotional level, or all three, that they suppressed, denied, and rejected the aspects of themselves that was a child. In order to become whole again, they are attracted to the aspect of themselves that they have lost. They are attracted to children because by being with a child, the innocence that they are missing can be a part of them again. Pedophiles who seem like monsters to the rest of us are in fact just desperately craving to get their own innocence back. Ironically, by trying to take their own innocence back, they often take innocence from children, inflicting the very same wound on those children as was inflicted on them in the first place. For this very reason, it's important for this cycle of pain to stop. But it's never going to stop if we continue to punish pedophiles. That, of course, is just going to make the pedophiles' innocence more and more unreachable to them. What needs to happen is that the pedophile needs to reclaim their own innocence again. The person who lost their innocence as a result of pain often feels utter powerlessness, assuming that they also lost their ability to really connect on an equal level with other people as a result of pain. Their subconscious definition of love now revolves around subjugation, domination, and often humiliation. Many truly believe that a person who submits to them loves them. They feel a sense of power when they are dominating and in control, and nothing, of course, is easier to dominate and control than a child. Unwilling to delve into their feelings of being powerless, insecure, incompetent, and out of control of their life, Many pedophiles turn to sexual contact with the child as a way to feel powerful, secure, competent, and in control of their life. There are, of course, some pedophiles who will justify their sexual interactions with children. They'll say things like, "the child wanted it," or "you can't prove to me that having sex with a child is wrong." But of course, this comes from a lack of understanding of childhood sexual development. It's easy to damage a person in childhood sexually by going to one extreme or to the other extreme, by making their sexual curiosity wrong or shaming them, or by interacting with them sexually way too early. There is no definite age at which point a child is able to give consent. So our desire to look for this kind of an arbitrary line is really happening in vain. But as much as we don't want to admit it, children are in fact sexual beings. But we are really confusing their sexual curiosity for the desire to interact with an adult sexually. Children desire comfort, connection, and touch, and many are also curious about their own body and other people's bodies. Children seek out connection and express physical curiosity without a clear sense of the difference between sexual touch and friendly touch. But sexual offenders often confuse children's openness to touch and desire for physical attention as a readiness or wanting to participate in adult sexuality. Offenders even claim that the child initiated a sexual encounter or enjoyed the experience while it was happening. But children often find an adult's move to elicit sexual activity confusing, and frequently they do not have a clear way to understand what is happening. The child in this scenario submits to what is happening regardless of whether or not they wanted or liked it. It must be said that children's bodies physiologically have the capacity to respond to sexual touch, but that does not mean that the sexual touch was understood, wanted, or that the child liked it. This child, who is usually nowhere near the age that their body is capable of conception, wants connection, not sex. That being said, it is not the sexual touch itself that is the most harmful thing to a child who is sexually abused. It is the other elements that accompany the sexual touch that are the most harmful. Things like blame, shame, feeling powerless, secrecy, feeling like they do not get to have boundaries and do not get to choose what to do or not to do with their bodies. I do not enjoy the idea of aversion therapy. It's not really a therapy because it does absolutely nothing to heal. It just changes the behavior. That being said, I couldn't go further without giving you this particular tool because in today's society, the damage that can be done on an interpersonal level by sexually interacting with a child, as well as the consequences in our society for being a sexual abuser, are just too high not to mention it. If you desire to program yourself so that you don't act out on the urge to sexually interact with children, you can do it by setting up a neural pathway in your mind that associates your arousal towards children to something really negative. For example, you can become sexually aroused and then switch to thinking about police arresting you or look at pictures of police making arrest. You can also become sexually aroused and then think about or look at pictures of snakes getting ready to bite or spiders. You want to choose something that you have a very bad association with and use it to associate it with your feelings of arousal towards children. This creates a neural pathway where eventually your arousal at the thought of having sex with a child will ultimately lead to an extreme negative reaction within your body. Keep in mind, of course, that the damage done by aversion therapy itself may be something you will need to heal in the future. But now let's go on and address how to actually heal if you have these kinds of tendencies. Now, what we have to do is to start off by understanding that innocence cannot be lost. It may be obscured from our view, but we can always reclaim our awareness of it. We have to look to uncover our own innocence. But where is that innocence? It is hiding underneath a level of pain. If we want to find our own innocence again, we have to stop running from and sedating our pain and instead go in the entire opposite direction. We have to dive deeply into our pain. We have to be with it unconditionally. Underneath that layer of pain is your innocence. I have demonstrated a process for this in my video titled How to Heal the Emotional Body. Somatic therapy is especially beneficial for anyone who feels sexual attraction towards children. So I would suggest that anybody who does seek out somatic therapy specifically. Also, we must rescue the childhood self that we have suppressed, denied, and rejected. The child self is in fact the seed of innocence, which is why inner child work is perhaps the most important thing that you can do as somebody who is a pedophile. Seek to understand yourself with an attitude of compassion. You're never going to be able to touch your own innocence as long as you keep looking at yourself like you're a monster, and as long as you keep looking at yourself like something's wrong with you, and as long as you keep looking at yourself like you're evil. The more you understand yourself in the context of someone who is hurt, the easier it will be to see your behaviors as what they are, which is a symptom of being hurt, rather than as a defect with no cause. Develop self-worth. If you are struggling with self-worth, watch my video titled, How Do I Discover Self-Worth on YouTube, and work on developing healthy boundaries. If you want to learn about healthy boundaries, watch my YouTube video titled, How to Develop Healthy Boundaries. Developing healthy boundaries teaches you to live a life of authenticity and to live from a space of integrity. And the more you develop authenticity and live from a place of integrity, the better your life will get and the less you loathe yourself. Meditate every day in whatever way works best for you. There are thousands of different meditation techniques. You just have to explore them and figure out which one you like best. It's impossible to list all of the ways that meditation benefits us in our lives, but as it applies to pedophilia, meditation gifts us with the ability to be completely present with ourselves and also the ability to control our persona. Now, the word control, of course, is a word which gives you an idea of what meditation can do for you, but it is also resistant in nature. So rather than to say that it gives you an immense amount of self-control, let's say that it puts you in the driver's seat of your life again. Most people who struggle with pedophilia feel utterly out of control of themselves and their lives. When we begin to meditate, urges do not compel us in the way that they once did. Meditation gifts us with presence of mind and heart, gives us the capacity for great peace, and puts us back in charge of ourselves. Start connecting with other people with the purpose of true intimacy. True intimacy is not about sex. It's about me seeing into you and you seeing into me. Practice being truly present with other people. Listen to them not just to understand them intellectually, but also to understand them emotionally. Begin to let yourself feel them and empathically connect with their experience. Be genuine with other people. Be authentic with them. And most especially, capitalize on the bravery inherent within you by being willing to be vulnerable with other people. Connect with the aspect of yourself that is untouched and uncorrupted by doing things that cause you to laugh and feel light-hearted, things like play. But what is play exactly? Play is an activity that is done for no practical purpose, merely for the purpose of enjoyment or feeling positive emotion. But that's where we have to stop and see how we got into this mess in the first place. We don't think that doing something just because it feels good serves any practical purpose, when it in fact serves the biggest purpose to our lives of anything else. We have all grown up thinking that play is not synonymous with purpose. We have been led to believe that there is something more important than happiness itself. Then we grow up and wonder why we aren't happy without realizing that we aren't happy because we don't take the straight path to happiness by prioritizing enjoyment. Rather, we spend our lives beating around the bush hoping that our happiness will come as the end result of other priorities, like keeping a reliable job or reaching our goals. Instead, consider that enjoyment is a serious practical purpose. And ask yourself every single day, how could I play today? If you would like to protect your child from being taken advantage of, there's some real ways to do that. Step 1, of course, is to help your child understand their own sexuality as their sexuality naturally progresses and as their sexual curiosity naturally develops. If you shame a child for their sexuality or for their sexual curiosity, you're putting them at war with their sexuality for the rest of their life. 2, this is the most important one. You have to put a child in a space where they can connect to their own boundaries and develop healthy boundaries on their own. Now, a lot of parents don't do this. because we like the idea of obedience or of a nice and easy child more than we like the idea of a child who is able to grow into a fully functional and healthy adult. We cannot teach our children healthy boundaries if we violate our children's boundaries, if we don't make it okay for them to decide what they want to do with themselves. So this is what I'm talking about. So often what I see with parents of young girls is that the young girl will not want to do something, like, I don't want to go kiss my aunt or uncle. And then the parents will shame the child for that. Come on, go kiss them. Come on, they're going, it's Christmas, go kiss them. And even though they don't want to do that, they have to if they want approval from their parents. Now, we think that later in life, if another adult comes onto that child is going to then say, no way, we've trained them not to. They're going to go along with whatever another adult tells them to do. We have trained them to ignore their own feelings and wants and needs. We must allow them to know it's okay to set the rules for their own bodies and honor the rules that other people have for their bodies. If you make your child obedient to adults, they will be obedient to every adult, including the ones you really don't want them to be obedient to. You also want to give them a lot of connection. Connect with your child's heart and soul. Figure out their dislikes and likes and connect with them. Figure out their wants. Figure out their needs. A child who feels lonely or misunderstood or ignored or outcast is at serious risk for seeking that connection from an adult who in fact has sexual intentions towards him or her. See pedophilia as what it really is, which is a hurt person who is trying to reconnect desperately with the aspect of themselves that was a child, with the aspects of themselves they have lost, with their own innocence. An innocence in a childhood that they lost, in an inner child that they had to dissociate from to survive in the environment they were raised in. If you are a therapist, this is your prerogative anytime someone who feels sexual attraction towards a child enters into your office. Now, it's going to be very difficult because that innocence is going to be underneath a level of pain and vulnerability that they don't want to go near. But I can assure you that once they do, if you hold their hand through that particular process, it will be one of the most beautiful processes that you can possibly imagine. If you are suffering as a result of being a pedophile, you are not evil. A much larger percentage of the population on Earth has the very same urges that you do. You just don't know about it because they don't tell you. If you are a pedophile, your number one prerogative is to reconnect and reclaim your own innocence. Make innocence the absolute theme of your life. Allow the universe to place people and circumstances in your life that will help you to reconnect to your innocence. Every single person that steps into your life, I want you to start looking at them like they might actually hold the missing puzzle piece to putting back together your own innocence. Have a good week.